So how do you keep a story interesting to maybe the same group that's heard that story and you've been in with that group for, you said 14 years. It's like, okay, this is
Yeah.
so good. Great question. How I would respond to that. First thing that came to mind when you said that is start the story in a different place.
Mm.
Start the story in this example, start the story after the car crash, standing on the roof of the car. Start there.
Yeah.
I was staring down at the hood of the car, and there was a shine on that, and I realized the shine was my blood. Start
Mm.
there.
Yeah.
Okay, people go like, "Oh, wait a minute, he just went to the pinnacle, the magic moment of the story." And then, because when storytelling does not have to be chronologic.
Mhm.
So start the story in a different place. And people go like, "Oh, okay, let's hear this version of it." The other way to do it, if you tell a story sensorially, add different details at different times. And we're using Brendan's story as an example, but there's times where he tells the story of opening the brochure and it said escape.
Mhm.
Well, he doesn't tell that every time.
Mm.
He tells that at certain times. He probably reads the crowd, right time, right story, what pieces to put in there. And then I'd also say with this too is trust, have confidence that when you change the story up, just these little tweaks to the story, that it's going to be perfect for your audience at this time.
Mm.
I've heard the same story 10, 12 times, maybe probably more. But every time I hear it, it's like, oh, I got something different that time. Why? Because I'm in a different place to hear that story in a different place. But that might be good to remind your audience of that. It's like, you've heard this, but you're going to get something different out of today because this is the story I'm going to tell. It's like, oh, okay. So it switches a little bit. And prepare your audience for that. I tell a story of being shy in high school, and you've heard me tell that story. But I can add different parts to that story that changes things up. And as you know, the story, part of it, I just told the story last week, and I said, I was trying to talk to the prettiest girl. And I went up there and I talked to them, and then they closed me off like the women typically do in college. And so I kind of broke through, and then I fumbled through my words. And they thought, oh, what a geek. And the room snickered. They laughed. And I said, well, that night I went home, cried myself to sleep. And that snickering made them feel like, oh, I was one of the ones in the room. I was on the wrong side of the story. And they could feel that. Now, it's really important that they don't feel pity for me. It was important for me to pull them into me. So then at that point, it's like, have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt like crying yourself to sleep? So they may not have, none of them I asked if any of them were wallflowers, and nobody in the room was wallflowers. I was like, oh, I'm alone in this room with this experience. So when they got to the place and snickered, I was like, oh, I could have expected that because I knew that they weren't wallflowers.
Mhm.
But then they couldn't feel pity for me because I cried myself to sleep. I grabbed them that way, but I was like, have you ever felt that way? Of course, everybody has. And so now I made a common experience again. So there's those kind of different mechanisms that you can use to bring it alive for the same audience in different ways.